So, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Soulpreneur podcast, Soulpreneur Secrets podcast. And I'm honestly just so delighted to welcome Andy Harrington, who is one of the world's, or if not the world's, leading speaking coach. And I've had the privilege of working with Andy for a couple of years. And while we were working, he said a couple of times about our need to look at our inner child, to go back and revisit our inner child. And that is what is I am absolutely so excited to be able to talk to Andy about and to get his perspective on. So welcome, Andy. And
it's a pleasure as always, Deborah, and welcome to all you folks listening in this special episode of your Soulpreneur podcast. So what did you want me to talk about first? You want me to talk a bit about the inner child stuff, is that right?
yes, because I know that you've done a lot of NLP, and I know that you are a deeply spiritual person because I felt it from you. So yes, when you say to people, it's really important that you reconnect with your inner child. I don't know if reconnect was the right word that you used, but you definitely said that you have to go back and know your inner child or meet your inner child. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so I probably said reclaim, I suspect, your inner
Yeah.
child. Look, I think one of the most profound things I ever either heard or thought, and these are things sometimes they come to you, sometimes you hear them, but you don't remember where they always came from. So apologies to anybody out there that may have heard this from somebody else. But my viewpoint is we kind of, as people, we either do things either as a way to try to win love, get love, share love, or as a compensation for not having it. And so, my work has led me to obviously work with a number of people. And my experience is most of the time, we're trying to succeed or achieve in order to become worthy of love. Because, once you become good at something and you get lots of praise and you feel good about yourself, then obviously your heart can open up more and you typically let in more love and let out more love that you radiate through your frequency to other people. But of course, if you're constantly chasing to be worthy of love, the chase to be worthy of love and love itself are two different things. One's more getting a feeling of being, status, significance, importance, and the other is love. And though they're kind of similar, they are actually a different vibration. So if you're constantly chasing the approval of love, if you don't validate self, if you can't first feel worthy of it in yourself, you'll always be chasing it to a degree. So for most of us, no matter what our childhood has been, from the worst sort of abusive situation to a great parenting, we're all, at that early formative stage, are so wanting and needing love, even with parents that loved you, but would have no doubt made mistakes along the way, shouted at you maybe, and, said just, exactly the wrong thing at the wrong time, or didn't praise you, because they were busy or whatever it might be. It's quite easy for you to make the assumption that, you're not worthy of love, or at least feel that you are in that moment and have that little bit of missing. And that can fester into some kind of ongoing belief that you're not enough. We live very busy lives. Parents are exceptionally busy, way more busier than they probably were, 50 years ago, because the world is that way. We're all distracted. We've got phones, etc. So they're probably, as we're not getting the kind of levels of attention from our significant loved ones that we probably used to previously. And we ourselves, children themselves today, are more buried in their devices, for example. So probably, aren't even recognizing or noticing those appreciations or signals of love, and getting around that dinner table, etc., having those conversations and healing up and understanding each other, getting to know each other. Those things are, they're not as prevalent today as they maybe used to be. So my thought process is that, before you go forwards and try to succeed in life, the next thing, the thing you've got to do more is go backwards. got to go back and undo some of those disempowering decisions that you made about yourself. Go back and almost review some of those, what I would call significant emotional events, however they were. Go back and review them, but from a different perspective. Because what we'll often do as adults is we cope. All people find a way to cope. Now, that's a different conversation about coping mechanism, whether the coping mechanism is pretty benign or whether it's actually quite harmful to you and potentially other people as well. Either way, we all find a way to get through. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So we always find a way to cope. And then in our mind, we think, well, I'm over that. I'm done. It's good. It's ages ago. It's fine. But then what you have to do is look at behavior. If you look at someone's behavior and it seems a bit sort of out of character, odd, or, like they've been hooked by something, then normally that's attached to something unresolved previously, which of course is going to be outside their awareness. And the problem is that then they start to identify with themselves getting hooked and stuff. That's just me, that's just who I am. But it's not necessarily who they are. It's just their protective self coming out. It's that coping mechanism, if you will, coming out. And again, that coping mechanism could be one from somebody who becomes angry and controlling, somebody who hides away, for example, when stress shows up, to somebody who becomes very logical and dissociated, someone who just keeps busy all the time, for example. And all those are just coping mechanisms. They are what I would call our shadow self. And we all have one, even me. The question is, how often does it get triggered? Like what has to happen for it to come out? For some people, it's out every day. And for some people, it's, very rarely. So no one's ever the finished article, but that's the key. What could you do today to reduce that being hooked and going into a coping mechanism shadow self? And the only way you're going to do that is to go back, because there was a time and a place where you didn't respond that way. You didn't come out of your mother's womb, being afraid of public speaking, for example. You didn't come out your mother's womb, for example, being hurt by people that said a few words about you. You learned that behavior somewhere, somehow. It's actually possible to go back and unlearn it. Strange word to use, but we can go back and unlearn that by going back in time. And in essence, because that's the beauty of our mind, is even though, and this is kind of bizarre, but I'm sure you'll get it, and so your audience, is that when we say we're going back, you're not actually going back in the past, because arguably the past doesn't exist. And when we go in the future, we're not actually going in the future, because the future doesn't exist. All that exists is now. But the question is, how do you represent now to yourself? Because you review the past and replay the same movie, for example. So if you go back and you change the movie that's stored in the head, and you see it a different way, you make the movie different. And in NLP and stuff like that, you can do strange things like making the picture black and white, all those kind of things. And you can, but that's nice. But what we can actually do is we can actually change the meaning of that image as well, and get to a place of resolution and third person, godlike eye, seeing down it all from a place of better understanding. And we can unpin all of that stuff that causes us to be hooked in the future. We have more love for ourselves and for the people that hurt or harmed us, maybe unwittingly sometimes. And we can, get to a better place. Whether you call it forgiveness or not is another matter. But we get to a place of understanding, and we're less triggered in the future. And we can create a new identity for ourselves, a new way. And that's important specifically for audiences that I work with, because I work with change makers, as I'm sure you do. We are people, the people I work with who are, coaches, consultants, therapists, people who want to help others facilitate change. Well, it kind of, the saying is, you've got to be able and willing to facilitate change for yourself. Because if you haven't been there yourself, if you haven't understood what it takes to unpin all that, then how can you possibly do that for others? And when you're sharing a message, as I do, for 4 days plus in an event which you've attended, our speakers university, public speakers university program, you've got to be as empty a vessel as you possibly can and not be carrying stuff with you, because it blocks the spiritual godlike message coming through you. If you're carrying around all of these limitations inside yourself, then you don't seem to resonate at a frequency which means you can read the audience, read the moment, and be a vessel of a voice and a message for those that are around you. That was quite a long answer. I'm sorry, I waffled quite a lot there. I hope that was useful.
Absolutely. No, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And very much what I've been talking about with my audience. Go back, look at those pictures, those little movies again, and create a new one. Why not? You can be who you
Yeah.
want to be. Like you can decide that I've actually written my whole background story. I was born a traveler. I was born in a gypsy caravan, and we had an amazing life living out in the countryside.
Wonderful.
Why
Yeah,
not?
absolutely
We
wonderful.
we can be who we want to be. And for me, one of the other things about going back into our early childhood is reclaiming that imaginative child, the creative child, the magical child. Can you say anything about that? Because one of the things that really struck me, working with all the people that you work with, is that entrepreneurs have to be incredibly creative, and they've got to do this all by themselves. They've got to engage their audience in some way, and that we need to dig deep in order to be entertaining as speakers, to capture that, to make that connection.
Yeah, it's a good observation that you make. It's, entrepreneurship. I mean, you could actually have an event called "Claim the Entrepreneur Within," couldn't you? Because, claim the inner child within the entrepreneur within is kind of the same thing, because entrepreneurs essentially create something out of nothing. Because when you start, you have nothing. You have an idea. That's not too dissimilar to a kid who plays with a cardboard box. You have nothing much to work with. You have a beginnings of something. And of course, for many, many adults, they've become less and less creative. Um, we could argue why that is. We grow up and we become more serious. We become more self-conscious. And of course, school, as good as it is, has a fairly decent tendency, a poor tendency, but I should say really, but a tendency to over stress the more academic side and less the creative side, unless you happen to have a Dead Poet Society kind of English teacher working with you, for example. Then you might be unlucky in that. I remember for years and years, my English was always like C plus, and it was always because my creativity side was brilliant at writing stories, except my spelling, my punctuation was awful, and that's the bit my brain focused on, because it was the bit that was wrong. And so rather than say, hey, you're a genius at this, your story, your creative stories are amazing, it was just constantly stressed the bit that wasn't right. And of course, I just then think, well, I'm just not very good at English. It turns out later on I was actually very creative and good at creating stories, etc., which turned out to be very useful in my later career as a presenter speaker that helps myself and others create stories as part of their presentations. But so yeah, for sure. I mean, when you think about it, I've got young children. I've got six altogether, and the youngest is still only just 8. And it's great. It's magical to be around children of that age, because it constantly reminds you of who you used to be. And of course, if you're
Yeah.
not surrounded by children a lot, you'll forget that pretty quickly. And a child of that age, let's say 6, 7, 8, they're not going to spend much time worrying about what's been. They don't spend hardly any time worrying about what's coming. They spend pretty much time nowhere else other than this moment called now. And of course, sometimes that means their now is buried in their whatever they're doing, and they're not forethinking to, getting themselves prepared for school in the next half an hour, whatever. And of course, that's what our job is, to try to have them be able to plan ahead as well. But the problem is, I hope that both parents and school probably overemphasizes that part and under praises the creative side, And then I guess we can end up compartmentalizing that bit, put in a box and not think it's that valuable. Well, arguably today, given the nature of AI, etc., and things of that nature, that might be the last dominion of human beings, is our true creativity that makes us truly human. So, yeah, for sure. I mean, Richard Branson, I suppose, is a good example of someone who's very childlike, if you know him pretty well. He's very childlike in his behaviour. Certainly, he was, in the days where Virgin was growing, he was very willing and apt to play the fool to just get some publicity, for example. And I guess that's a good example. We need to be willing to be creative, see opportunities that other people don't see, creative with our adverts, with our ideas, with our some kind of new offer or service that fills a gap in the market, for example. We have to be willing, because all life is a game, and we don't play it that way. I think sometimes the game becomes so serious we've forgotten that it is actually a game. But the more you stay in that zone of remembering all of this is a game, and the ultimate goal is joy, not winning, which joy might come from winning, but the ultimate joy is that you get to be alive. And that just remembering that alone can make all your fear go away and just go, you know what, I'm joyous because I'm alive and I get to play this game a bit longer.
That's brilliant. I love that. You're right. Yeah, it's just about being joyful, and children, like, they just seem to be naturally joyful, don't they? I mean, even if, they've had a really hard time, they sort of like, they'll go and find something to be joyful about. They can't
Yeah,
stay.
that's our essence. That's our
Yeah.
essence. That's who we all are. We've just had it either beaten out of us, or we've had it coaxed out of us in some way, and we've had our focus put on something else instead. But that's who
Yeah.
we all are. Everything we're doing is a way to try to win love, get love, experience those higher vibrations of joy, laughter, etc. We don't experience them too often because we get stuck in our head.
Yes, exactly. And so, one of the things that, I probably know, I'm an astrologer. And when I work with people, I so often see something, I think, wow, you're probably really good at this, aren't you? And they go, well, I did it as a
Mm,
child. I loved it as a
yeah,
child. Don't do
yeah,
anything like that now. And, and it's like, as you said, it's like we forget, or we just think they're just childish things. There's that quote, isn't there, about I left behind childish things. And how do you think that people can really re-engage with that creativity? Have you got any clues or tips how people can find that inner fun child again, what I call the fairy child or the magical child again? Because as you say, that is what makes us smile. That's what makes us laugh and feel like
yeah. Well, we all
life.
experience it. Even those of us that have become more shut down, will have moments where we re-experience it. But normally that's because somebody else has created it for us. So we've been invited to something. We just, something's happened and we went, oh, I don't really fancy this, because we're all putting our old boring self on, and then we get them and go, actually, I really love this, and you sort of re-engage. So you've got to remember, when those moments happen by chance, remember that's like, it's like a little awakening, as you might say, to an older version of yourself that's been, which is really just old neurons that haven't fired for a while are firing up again. Again, there's that feeling of familiarity. So I guess what you need to do is say, well, how can I create that? Because in one of the most, it seems so simple, the most easiest thing, psychological tool you can ask is ask yourself better questions. So if you
Absolutely.
ask yourself the question, which is, how can I have more joy today? What could I do to make money in a more joyful way? How can I use my creativity and make money from it? If you constantly keep asking that question, it's like Google. Like when you type in Google a question, it will go away and find its searches. Your brain does exactly the same, and you might not get the answer immediately, but if you constantly ask that question, it's like your brain looks outward and keeps on looking at everything around you, and in the background, it's constantly asking that question. Eventually, you'll go, and it might be 3 days later. I could do that. And of course, the next thing you're going to do is your logical self is going, no, you can't. You can't make money from that. And that's that's the doubtful part of yourself kicking in. So then there'll be a battle between, your creative self and your logical self. But you've got to go with the flow. You got to develop that idea, think it for longer, share it with other people, and let that idea blossom and grow into something valuable. So yeah, just ask yourself better questions and create moments of joy and happiness. Don't wait for them to come to you.
That thing about asking better questions, that's another thing I've been talking to my audience about a lot. And of course, it's something that children do. They're always
Yeah.
saying, why? But why? But why? How does that work?
Mhm.
Why? Why?
Yes.
And then we you're in a classroom of 30 kids, there isn't room to keep asking questions as you get older. And so, but I think
Well,
this
the
is
thing
so
I
right.
think sorry to jump in. The thing
Yeah.
about which struck me there is that um, children aren't afraid to ask questions, so they don't mind admitting they don't know.
Right. Mm.
But an adult doesn't want to say, okay, how does that work? They want to go instead, I know. And it's a not common response. Somebody says something, yeah, I know. You don't fucking know. They just say they know because they want to know. but asking questions, it means admitting I don't know something.
Mm.
And the ability to be able to say, I don't know, and be open to new ideas, to be open to new possibilities, new ways of thinking. Because most adults, what we're doing constantly is just reinforcing what we know already, because it makes us feel comfortable and safe. It makes us feel like we don't have to lower our status. And actually, you just need to be willing to, to be so like, okay, what did you learn? Tell me more about that. How did that work? What did how could I do? You've got to ask those questions in that way so you remain curious, because kids are naturally curious, but adults aren't most. We want, instead to be curious, we want to be certain. And you have to give up certainty. You've got to give up what you think you know because you've cemented it in your mind. You've got to say, okay, you've got to sort of dispel that from it, just suspend it for a minute and say, okay, well, hang on a second. What do you think? How did that work for you? Like, how do you do X? And be really open to new ideas. That's what is another good tool. So that sort of goes with questioning.
Absolutely brilliant. And it's another thing I've been talking about to people, is that it's okay to be in what I call that liminal space of not knowing.
Yeah.
Because actually at the moment we're in such a tipping point of our collective planetary humanity evolution, if you like, and we don't know. We really don't know where we're going
Yes.
or what's happening. But it's okay to sit in that not knowing if you keep asking, well, what's the next best thing for me to do? How can I be more useful today? Or how can I be more, as you said, how can I be more joyful today? Um, it's something that I worked with a lot, like, okay, just be more joyous, just be more joyous, be more joyous. And it's amazing, it ripples, we all live in the quantum field, we all affect everything else around us. And if we can be in that more joyous place ourselves, that more creative space ourselves, then it's like that Marianne Williamson quote, the more light we can be in ourselves, the more we give permission to other people to show their light too.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And that goes not just for the world in general. You can micro that right down to your family unit. If you wake up in the morning and you're not particularly joyous, and you're one of the key people in the family, then that's going to radiate out and have a sort of, bear with a sore head kind of approach to everybody else, and then suddenly everybody else isn't quite as joyous. So it's up to us. We've got to create that environment, whether it's our micro or macro environment. So when I'm presenting in front of, could be a few hundred people or 50 people, whatever it might be, it is, I want to be in a state of joy and happiness all the time, because who wants to look at somebody presenting for 4 days with a serious face? My tendency to get when I'm presenting is to activate my inner jester.
Yeah.
So I find that for me, the one that gives me the most flexibility. It means I'm constantly looking for ways to create joy, because that's the jester, right? And that means having fun with the audience. and I don't, and that allows me to really be myself, lets my guard down, not perfect, and there's no perfection here, it's just joy. And then that gives everyone else permission. Then we all evolve as a group. We evolve into a place where we're all willing to have joy, have fun, because we're all learning anyway, and we want to be in a state of creativity and curiosity. And so for me, the jester is the key. It seems to me to be the one. Maybe it's one of those natural, but again, it's quite close to childhood and exactly the same. It doesn't mean I don't have the ability to step into my warrior, or, for example, at times, or for that matter, my sage, and connect more to the spiritual realm, or for that matter, my lover. But the place I start at, that I move out from, is constantly the jester.
And for me, that the jester is very connected to the spiritual realm. It's
Right.
like, whoa, I mean, we have to be completely trusting to be in the jester.
Yes.
We have to know that, like, we're not going to say something completely inappropriate. We have to be very, very connected
Yeah, it's
so that our
true.
awareness is still very out on what is actually going to resonate.
Yeah. Yeah, but even if it does, even if we make a mistake, then we just go into our lover, and we find a way to resolve it. It's all there's no mistakes.
No, that's right. We're all human, and yeah. So is there anything else that you'd really like to share? Something that maybe that's popped into your head while we've had this conversation and you're like, oh, I think that's important.
Well, I mean, you'll know as well as I do, from your own work and mine, how important everyone's story is. And obviously, in my speakers university, we teach people how to find their story. Because a lot of the time people think, oh, nothing's really happened to me. I don't really have a story, which is, of course, completely wrong. They've just found a way to diminish it all in their mind and forget about it and cope with it, or, just don't think it's that good compared to somebody else, for example. But there's always a great story in there. And every great story has its three acts. And briefly, that's Act One is where we encounter a problem or a challenge in some way, which leads to a conflict, typically, externally, but also internally. And then Act One then leads to some kind of loss or setback. Act Two is then the sort of journey to resolve it in some way, but obviously it's not an easy journey and takes a while to find the answer. We typically find that through some kind of catalyst, which then leads to some kind of insight, and we make a new decision. And the decision is to do something, to act in a new way, normally a way in which we're scared to act. Because normally, all problems are solved with the right action. It's just sometimes we don't know what that right action is, or if we do, we're kind of scared to do it. But eventually, through Act Two, we kind of set in the mind what we need to do. And Act Three is then putting that into action, and ultimately getting the transformation, and we evolve as people. And what I like to say is that 3-act sequence is always going to be there. Meaning we're going to rotate our lives through many Act 1, 2, and 3s. We're always we can't control stuff happening. It will always happen. You can't control people dying. You can't control the economy. All sort of things that are outside your control. So we're always going to experience some kind of loss that, we have to be attached to something. It's, spiritual would tell you, try to have unattached, but it's human to be attached. That's what it means to be human. We have to attach, otherwise we're dissociated. But at the same time, we have to be willing to let go when it's time to let go. And I think it's really good for people to recognize where they are in their own story. Where are you in your own little 3-act sequence? Are you in pain right now because you've just lost something, or about fearful of losing something? And are you currently in, say, the bottom of Act 2, where you're in a bit of the doldrums, where, you're kind of, nothing's really going on, you're kind of in delay, denial, distraction, and doubt? Or are you in that sort of turning point right now, where you're just seeing some kind of insight happening, maybe here even, and you're ready to make that new decision? Or are you in Act 3 and you're emerging, and summer's coming back and you're growing again, for example, because everything is kind of seasonal. And it's good to know where you are, because otherwise we get lost and we think, this is happening to me again, beat ourselves up. Okay, well, it's happened to everybody again. This is life. This is our Act 3 sequence. The key whenever we experience a down, is not to get stuck in our own story. Meaning, don't get stuck that we don't keep moving through that 3-act sequence. The goal is not to get stuck at the bottom of Act 2. Act 2, the bottom of Act 2, having experienced a loss, that doldrums, we can get so attached to our own coping mechanisms down there of delay, denial, distraction, and doubt, or inaction, reaction, protraction, or distraction, that can happen. For some people, that's a few days or weeks. For some people, it's decades. So there's a big difference there. So if we get stuck in our own story and we believe that nothing, and we become so attached to our own coping mechanisms, we will miss life coming along and giving you catalysts. The possibility for change, because we're afraid to make that new decision. And often what will happen is we end up only making it when we have to. There's no other option, or the pain of the inaction becomes so great that we have to change anyway, which means we're kind of changing too late. So recognizing where you are in your own story can play huge dividends, because number one, you then stress less about it because you have this sort of macro view of where am I in my story. So you go like, okay, this is cool. I know what's happening. I know where I am. I know what's coming next. It gives you confidence. And also then again, it just means you move through some of the areas of that story more quickly. Don't get stuck there. Don't beat yourself up too much. Don't do something that can harm yourself or others, and stay more connected to source and recognize it's all part of the universal laws and the bigger plan for you, since nothing else exists and you're just projecting all this anyway to have some fun and something to do. You are the projector of that story, right? And that story is just playing out on this vista now, but it's you up there, around there, down there, wherever you are, that's projecting all of this, because life is boring as a singularity. So
That's brilliant. I love that. I love that description, telling people about the story, because I must admit, so many of the young people in particular, that I'm sort of like holding their hands a little bit, if you like, and they, as you say, they're stuck in that low point. And what I discovered is, I said, well, one young person actually taught it to me. He said, I just keep being grateful, just keep being grateful. I keep being grateful that I've got this, I've done that, I've got this. I just keep being grateful for every little thing.
yes.
And
Yes.
and then, like you said, it's just about asking, what can I do? What can I do to make this different? What can I change?
Yes.
And I think you're right. It's like we're learning how to pull ourselves out of that low point quicker, more quickly.
Yeah. And being more grateful, number one, then asking yourself good questions will always typically get you more creative. We're back to that, more joyful, and therefore that will ease the journey through to the next stage in the story.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Okay, Andy, I don't think I've got another question to ask you, but if you've got anything else that you really want to say.
No, just that if any of your audience has a mission, a desire, a goal to express themselves, because I think that's what we're here for, isn't it? The whole purpose of life is to express yourself, and for me, there's no better place, as you know, to express yourself and share your story, your journey, and your life lessons. If you can do that in a way that serves an audience in some way, whoever that audience is, whether it's a corporate audience, children, small business owners, mums, whatever, teenagers, whatever it might be, if you have a goal of trying to figure out how do I create that message and how do I deliver it in a way that really resonates and really permeates through even the most skeptical of minds, to transform them in some way so that they become also more helpful, joyous to themselves and others, then I'd certainly love for those folks to reach out to us and potentially join one of our programs. The easiest way they can do that is we run, as you know, a free event, a free virtual event that goes for a few hours we do it 2 or 3 times a week actually. And if they want to go and register for that, they can choose whichever is one of the next 2 dates that are coming up. They can choose it. Okay, it's free of charge, and they put on their computer or their phone, and on the time it runs, which is normally 9:30 a.m. in the morning. Although I think we have an evening one as well. Then yeah, for sure they can register for free and watch it. And if at the end of it, they want to invest a bit of their income into joining, like you did, our Speakers University 4-day program, where they get an online program to watch, learn, and put all this stuff together, and a 4-day live with me and my team, then at the end of the free event, they can certainly let us know if they're interested. A member of my team can to reach out to them and discuss the options. So the website for that, it's got a hyphen in the middle, so let's remember that bit. So it's presentation hyphen profit, so presentation dash profits.com. Presentation hyphen or dash profits.com. That should take to the page. They can read about it and register if it's for them. And if not, I then hope that this message I've given them has been serving them in some way. And I really am grateful and appreciative that you would reach out to me to want me to reach out to your audience in that way. I appreciate it.
It's been fabulous, Andy. Thank you. And I would just like to say that when I went to that PSU, those 4 days, it was not long after lockdown, wasn't it? And
yes,
to do something in a room with mixing with other people was just so fabulous.
yeah.
And as you say, that thing about finding our story, I was sat yesterday and I thought, what is my career story? I've just done so many things. There must be something that links it all together. And just finding our story that connects us, connects everything we've done together, and that we can then share with other people, and then they can find their story. It's such a beautiful thing to do. And I
And
just want
you are yourself a beautiful soul. It's been a pleasure being part of your journey through our Speakers University and our Professional Speakers Academy. And it's been a delight to see just how much you've evolved as a speaker and a presenter through what we've been teaching. And I've certainly loved watching you on the bigger stages when you performed in some of our speaking competitions and did so well.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to serve. It's a pleasure to be alive, and it's a pleasure to know you. Thank you. See you soon, guys.
Yeah.